All right, today we're looking at something pretty wild, a structured, data-driven forecast for what could be one of the biggest moments in human history. We're not just looking at a prediction, we're breaking down the entire framework behind it.
So let's just jump right in with the big one. The question that's really at the heart of all this. It's a question people have been asking forever, and it gets right to our place in the universe.
And the forecast we're digging into today gives a very specific answer. May 2033. I know, it's an incredibly bold claim, right? So the whole point of this explainer is to figure out the why behind that exact date. So where does a prediction like that even come from? Let's switch gears from the what to the how, and really unpack the system of thought that led to this timeline. And that's the obvious next question, isn't it? I mean, how can anyone possibly predict a specific date for something this massive? Well, the answer isn't about guesswork. It's about a proposed universal pattern. Okay, so this whole prediction comes from a theory called Triune Harmonic Dynamics, or THD for short. The name itself kind of gives you a clue what it's about. Triune means three parts, and harmonic points to this idea of a repeating universal rhythm. The theory basically says there's a hidden 369 pattern that's the blueprint for, well, everything. From physics to consciousness, it's all supposed to be one single framework for how things change and evolve. And the person behind this entire framework is Kevin L. Brown, a researcher, inventor, and author. He's the one who developed Triune Harmonic Dynamics, not just as an idea, but as a testable principle for how reality actually transforms. All right, let's zoom in on this universal 369 pattern. It's basically the engine driving this whole forecast. So if we want to get it, we've got to understand this part. And this quote from Kevin Brown himself just nails the core idea. What if all change, evolution, and existence itself followed a singular, universal pattern? You know, it's that search for an underlying order, a kind of rhythm hiding beneath all the chaos. So at its core, this pattern is a simple, repeating three-step dance. First, you have emergence. That's when something new is born. Then comes contrast, a time of challenge or conflict that really tests that new thing. And finally, it all wraps up with integration, where the old and the new combine to create something stronger, a higher level of order. And this three-step process is said to happen over and over at every scale of reality. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we're getting into the math behind it. The main thing to remember here is that THD isn't just some philosophical concept. It's actually grounded in a specific formula that tries to map out this universal process of change. So if we look at the equation, each piece actually maps back to that three-phase cycle we just talked about. Think of 3n as the simple start. That's emergence. Then you have 6n squared and 9n cubed. Those represent the more complex phases, contrast and integration. It's the whole process of testing and resolving that first simple structure into something new and more stable. Okay, so now let's connect the dots. How does this universal theory of change actually build into a specific forecast for first communication? This is where the theory becomes a timeline. So, the forecast lays this 369 pattern right on top of a timeline with three clear phases. First up is seeing, predicted for 2026 to 2027. This is when UAP sightings are supposed to become so constant that you just can't deny them anymore. Next, we have the testing phase, from 2029 to 2030, where we might see a first exchange of data. And all of this leads up to the grand finale, the talking phase, in 2033, which is supposed to be full two-way communication. And get this, within that final talking window, the model pinpoints a single day with the highest probability for what it calls the information delivery event. And that date, May 22nd, 2033. Okay, now we get to what might be the most crucial part of this whole thing. Because any credible scientific claim has to be testable, right? You have to be able to prove it wrong. So let's look at the exact conditions that would completely invalidate this forecast. And that's the absolute key here. This forecast isn't being sold as some kind of unshakable prophecy. Nope. It's being put out there as a hypothesis. And the number one rule of a good hypothesis is that there has to be a way to prove it's false. And the framework gives us some really clear black and white conditions. For example, if those massive, undeniable sightings don't happen in 2026 and 2027, well, the model's wrong. The author also has a financial bounty out there related to the theory's predictions, so if someone else claims that before the key dates, the model is wrong. And finally, if direct communication happens before 2030, then the whole predicted timing pattern is just off. And this is what brings the entire forecast crashing out of the abstract future and right into our immediate reality. The first major test for this whole model. It's happening like right around the corner. So let's look at the roadmap. The first real test of this forecast starts in March 2026, which is what's called the lock. That sets the stage for the big seeing phase. You see, each step is like a domino. If the events in one window don't happen, the chance of the next one's happening drops way down. So what are we left with? We've got a theory about a universal pattern, a very specific timeline, and a clear set of rules for how to prove it wrong. It really leaves us with a huge question. Is this a genuine map to an incredible future, or is it just an elegant pattern of wishful thinking? The beauty of this framework is that it says we don't have to just believe it. The first big test is almost here, and in the end, the data will be the judge.